Hello. This is a four-part talk for families about word study, which is an approach to teaching phonics, spelling, and vocabulary. My name is Donald Baer. I'm Professor Emeritus now from Iowa State University and University of Nevada, Reno. You'll find my website, handouts, and other materials at my website, and there's my email. There's a link to a handout for this presentation at that website, so you could follow along looking at your PDF there if you like. So if you're wanting to know more about word study and how families are involved, then this series is for you. The first part, they're based on Words Their Way books, the 6th edition of Words Their Way on the far left here, and then working clockwise, we have the pre-KK, Words Their Way with struggling readers, Vocabulary Their Way, 2nd edition, and then Words Their Way with English learners. And I'm very excited about this new book that's just perfect for this talk, Words Their Way for Parents, Tutors, and School Volunteers. I refer you to this book. It's based, this talk and this book are of the same developmental approach, and we work together as co-authors. So if your children are involved in a word study program, you might be interested in part 1, which is about what is word study. It's an overview. It ends with some ideas for family involvement, a lot of pictures to look at, and then choose the part 2, 3, 4 that makes sense for you. If your child is in emergent or letter name alphabetic stage, if your child's in the within word pattern stage, and then the last 2 stages, upper level word study with the syllables and affixes and derivational relation stages. Again, the handout can be found there, and a link to this actual presentation. So I'm really talking about word study. I'll go in more detail on this, but it involves phonics, spelling, and vocabulary. To put it in perspective, I want us to think about these 5 activities when we think about words, literacy instruction. And word study is just one part of a rich, robust literacy program. Word study, I may meet with the students for 15 minutes a day, and then on subsequent days, I may only meet with them for 5 days to talk about word study. We'll do a lot of other literacy activities, but then they will also have independent and partner activities for word study. So it's a part of the literacy diet, if you will, which we'll come to later on. So we read to our children, starts at an early age. We read to our children, this is a 2nd grade classroom. We read with our children. I've worked in reading centers as a university professor for many years, and we read with our students. This is how we might read with our students. We write with our students. And we talk with our students. And word study, these are some pictures. Here's a picture sort, a word sort, a picture sort on the floor. Playing games together with your partners. So now let's go into what is word study, part 1, and why is it important? And we'll end with an overview of family involvement. But these are the primary topics, starting with the word study equation, how teachers present word study. You'll see a lot of sorting and categorizing of words and pictures. I want to go into development and the layers, word study activities, we want to reconceptualize how we're teaching spelling, so that will be important. So you can see then how word study is in the classroom, and closing with what families can do. I'll expand on these, what families can do, in parts 2, 3, and 4 by stage. So when I'm teaching phonics, I'm also looking at spelling. Spelling and phonics go together. Similarly, when I'm teaching spelling, I'm also looking at vocabulary, and vocabulary spelling is a way of looking at vocabulary instruction. So when we're teaching people to read, becoming literate depends on the fast, accurate recognition of words in text and fast, accurate production of words in writing, so that readers can focus their attention on meaning. So you have to read the words quickly and accurately. It helps to be able to write the words quickly and accurately so that you can focus on meaning. So how do we do word study? Word study is something that we teach explicitly, and we use hands-on activities to help students with word recognition, writing, and vocabulary. So on the left, you see a picture sort by beginning sounds, and you see a two-syllable sort and looking at, do you double, E-drop, or make no change? The children cut the sorts up, and then they sort them. These sorts can also go on. The teacher introduces the sort in a sort of 4-step process. They demonstrate the sort, and that's the lengthy time I was talking about, which involves sorting and checking, reflecting. They talk about the sort, and this is the part that involves families most, is extending the sort. So the sort that the teacher demonstrates and the children are involved in every day, it extends to the home environment. So here I am sorting with students. This is a picture sort. Here's also a picture sort for long A and short A. Here's a 2nd grade teacher sorting with her students, and they're sorting by patterns. There on the far left, you see the CVCE, the consonant vowel consonant E, the CVV as in tray, the short vowel CVC, and the CVVC pattern. Here are some other sorts that the teachers have in terms of their materials. Now we're getting into development, but I want to show you how we think about development. Development is based on 3 layers of the writing system: alphabet, pattern, and meaning. And to call it by some other terms, we're looking at the sound system, or letter-sound correspondences, as in beginning consonants and preconsonantal nasals, all the way through short vowels and digraphs and blends. And then we get to the pattern layer and orthography, the writing patterns, if you will. We have the CVCE pattern. We have the common long vowel patterns that we were just talking about. We also look at unaccented syllables, open and closed syllables, inflected endings that we just looked at, the ED, for example. And then finally we look at the structure of words, the common prefixes, all the way down to looking at absorbed or assimilated prefixes. But you can see in 21 and 22 Greek and Latin, roots and stems. And these are ways of looking at words developmentally that fit 5 stages of spelling in green and 5 stages of reading. So you have the 3 layers across the top: alphabet, pattern, and meaning. And in English, we're looking at 5 stages of reading: emergent, beginning, transitional. And we're wanting to know where your child is developmentally. And usually there's a relationship between stages of reading, the beginning stage of reading, let's say, the second stage, and the letter name alphabetic stage. So we know from a variety of resources and research that there's a synchrony, a relationship among reading, writing, and spelling development. And because of that relationship and development, we can also look at using that relationship in our teaching. So if we see at the bottom here that the child spells bed, B-D, or B, or even B-A-D, that child is in the letter name alphabetic stage, the second column here of spelling stages. And if you run your finger up, you see that student is in the beginning stage of reading. Similarly, in the third column, you see the within word pattern stage, where they've learned how to spell short vowels, and they're experimenting with how to spell long vowels, as in float, F-L-O-W-T, might be a way they spell it. And you can see that their reading behaviors accompany the spelling behaviors, if you will. And so earlier, the letter name stage, the child, the person, reads aloud. They're word by word. They finger point. Whereas the transitional is approaching some fluency, missing expression, but is beginning to read with more fluency and begins to read silently, actually. The last two stages of spelling are the upper level spelling stages and the upper levels of reading. And you can see that in word study at the bottom there, we're looking at polysyllabic words from spelling the unaccented syllable in cattle, the EL or LE, all the way down to how to spell opposition. You can see roughly the stages and where, how they fit the grades and where we expect students to be at the end of the school years. Every child has a word study notebook. This is a child writing the sort into categories. Here's a sort for the children, and then they sort them into different categories. We'll come back to these by stages, but they have to be able to read the words. And so here's a sort for word families by pictures and by words, for long vowel patterns. This is a paste and label activity. Hammer, HMR. We have word study games that the students play. They're games that are easy ones, like the racetrack game, where the children, we make 3 copies of them in the classroom, where the whole group of 6 to 8 kids will be able to play during their seat work or center activities. Students like to make charts of word patterns that they add to. They like to play word study games like Jeopardy, simple board games. We are doing more and more research, and we've sort of located 10 characteristics or indicators of good word study classrooms, with number 7, student reflection, being so important. The students have got to be able to talk about their sorts. I'll come back to that at the end of this talk. But here's how deep it gets. Here's looking at word study for the word vocabulary. So there's onelook.com, and I typed in *VOC, star. These are all hot links to dictionaries, but a lot of these VOC have the same meaning, voice. Here's a common activity. This could be where the children just point to where the right column, I'll call out the word paint, where would it go? Or we could ask the children to write the words. And that takes us to spelling instruction. Let me just briefly talk about spelling instruction. Spelling is broader than a separate category. It's part of literacy instruction. This last point is terribly important. In the references, you'll see Stephen Graham's work. Students learn more about reading from spelling than they do about spelling from reading. If you look at spelling, the history of spelling, spelling is really designed to teach word study, part of word study, to teach phonics and vocabulary. If I were doing a traditional spelling program, which is fine, I would start with our sorts and make sure that the children can spell 40 to 50% of the words correctly, and that they can look for, at the end as an assessment, we're looking for 90% accuracy in spelling. But we're also looking for the children to be able to explain why they sorted the way they did, and once a week we'll have them write that reflection in their word study notebooks. And we also look for this knowledge to transfer to their writing. If they did a strong job of learning about long A's, then in their second draft writing, I would expect them to write long A's correctly. So they sort at home. We do send home refrigerator sorts and easy games for the students to play with you at home. Shane Templeton, one of our co-authors, shared this, that as far back as 1919, that we know that students should do more than just write the words 10 times. And writing the word 10 times is not effective. We want to think about word patterns. Here's a teacher. The children sorted, as you can see on the front of the desk, but then they're talking about the patterns and thinking about them. We'll get into concept sorts later on, and vocabulary activities. If you in the primary grades in particular, you're likely to see a schedule like this one from Monday through Friday. This is a grading form, but we can also have individual contracts. And so this is I like to say, well, the spelling grade really might be expanded into a word study grade. So at home, these are some things that you can do. The teacher may send these checklists or a note for you, a revision of something that we've sort of written for templates. Make sure that the sorts that the children are doing, and the sorts that they can read the words accurately, and that they can do the sorts. And then the second bullet, that they can do them fluently. That's why they repeat them. We were looking for fluency. The third, can they talk about the sort? So watch your student sort into categories. See if you know the categories. And so ask your student to explain the reason for sorting each column or category. I like to do speed sorts with the students and make sure they win. Say the words as you sort, and make sure the children say the words as they sort. And any card game, any board game, it can be a word study game like concentration, and you have them face down and you look for matches and pairs. Go on word hunts. Have an interest in words, as you'll see. But if you're studying long A's and something that the children just read with you, you might ask them to look for long A words. So play games and speed sorts and writing sorts. Take an interest in words and interesting words that you come across. Make the meaning connection. Think of related words, but nothing replaces wide reading. As I discussed earlier. We want more than just spelling. We want thinking about words and generalizing to their writing. We want vocabulary instruction where the children are vested, where they've chosen words of interest, and be generative about it. Think of related words, not just isolated words. Think of territory, terrain, terra, or define and related words. think about words in other languages, words and phrases, and tie vocabulary to note-taking at the upper levels. If you take notes about, and you'll see this at the upper levels, is so tied to the vocabulary. So these are the materials that we're used to working with you teachers on. These are some of the references that support our approach. And I end on this slide with word studies hard work. It's often with partners, and I call this the summertime armpit sort. So there's my website to write, and that's what I'll be covering in part 2. So thank you for joining me, and again, the handout can be found there.